Hello, 112 class or advanced digital photography. I wanted to make a brief video, and I'm going to actually put this one on YouTube so it's accessible to multiple sections about working in the various programs for processing your raw files. There's several out there. The ones we teach in our program include Lightroom, uh, I should say Lightroom Classic, and in some classes, Lightroom. And in many of the classes, starting with the 102 class or the intro class, we teach the workflow that includes raw file in through Bridge into Adobe Camera Raw Processor and Adobe Camera Raw Processor then into Photoshop to polish. So we've got those workflows, and I know it can be confusing, especially when you get to the advanced class, the 112 class, and we are teaching you a little bit about a program called Lightroom. So students may have some questions as to how to prepare their raw files so that they can see the edits that they made. And that's because we know that raw files never change. In other words, any processing you do to a raw file gets saved to a SIDECAR file. The problem is in Lightroom, it gets saved to a catalog file, a library catalog file. And so I want to show students in the advanced section how they can deal with submitting their version of RAW, whatever it happens to be, NEF for Nikon, might be CR2 or CR3 for Canon or ARW for Sony, etc. Submit that raw file and then also submit the sidecar so we can see the changes you made. Now, the easiest way probably is to go ahead and generate a DNG file out of those programs, and that's certainly acceptable too. But if you want to keep the file as a raw file so that we can look at it on screen to see the changes that were made, I'm going to share that process with you now. So I've got three folders here just for demonstration purposes. One is using the Bridge, Adobe Camera Raw, and Photoshop workflow. This is the one that we teach you when you are in probably the 102 or the beginning class. And it is probably the most friendly for graphic designers because graphic designers tend to not do entire catalogs of shots like a 24/7, 365 photographer would do. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to move into the Lightroom, the modern Lightroom. This one, interestingly, not a lot of people use, not even photographers. So there's the newer release of Lightroom that's out. They call it just straight up Lightroom. And then there's the Lightroom Classic. That's the Lightroom with the C, which in fact many practicing photographers do still use. So, and I should clarify that. Some do use this, but the vast majority do use this one. So we're going to go through all three scenarios. First scenario, I'm going to use the one that we do in 102. We have a raw file here. It is from a fashion photo shoot. So it's, a model, a paid model or paid talent. And it's, I believe, something from the web. It's open source. So you can probably locate and find this file as well. But this is from a modeling photo shoot. And I'm going to go ahead and open this inside of Adobe Camera Raw. Now, you'll notice the workflow is called Bridge. Bridge kind of replaces the library component that you would have in Lightroom. I'm just going to bypass that. We're going to skip right to the Adobe Camera Raw portion of the show here. So I've opened this photo into Adobe Camera Raw Editor. And keep in mind, the engine that powers the software, not the interface necessarily, but the engine that powers the software is common, or it's the same one that's used in Lightroom as well. So I'm going to go ahead and make a few edits to this image. It's actually a pretty good image sort of out of the gates, but I'll maybe make some exposure adjustments, maybe a slight temperature shift. Not too much here, around 5200, 5100, 5200. I can play with the tint just slightly. Okay, so that's the whole image. Now I'm going to use some masking. So I'm going to select the subject using the subject masking here in the Adobe Camera Raw Editor, and then we can make some adjustments to the exposure. So if I want the subject to be just slightly brighter, I'm going to go ahead and increase maybe about almost 3/4 of a stop on this. That may be a little too much in actuality, but that allows me to do the demo here. So I've got this set up the way that I like it. I'm just going to go ahead and click done. Okay. And what we're going to notice inside of our files here, I'm going to move this item out of the way here. Let's see, I can move this down to the corner. All right. What I've got in my files here is Adobe Camera Raw editing file. We've got the CR2, and then we've got the XMP. So the XMP contains all of my edits. If I want to open this file and see the edits, okay, I need to have the XMP or that sidecar file in the same folder. Remember, raw files never change. They're like photo negatives. The sidecar file contains the processing variations that we want to bring to the table. So that sidecar file is with this file now, and you can see the file looks the way I'd expect it to look. Okay, if I go ahead and click cancel, I can move this sidecar file outside of the folder. I'll come back to this CR2 and I'll open it again. And I could see that those lightning images or those things that I did have been erased. They're no longer there. That's because that sidecar file has been taken away. And remember that always, 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 when you do a raw file, we never change the raw file. So I'm going to go ahead and put that sidecar file back in. So it's in the same folder as this. And if I double click on it now, takes a second to open here. Now we can see those edits. We can see it's a little lighter. The color is just a little bit changed. So it's an important thing to keep in mind that if you want people to see the changes that you made to your raw file, it needs to be accompanied by this XMP file. And if you want to use the Bridge ACR Photoshop workflow for my advanced classes, I certainly will allow it. In order to submit this, I would probably then zip this. In other words, compress it. And then we have a zip folder here, and this I would submit. Okay. And then I would have inside this directory both my raw file and my sidecar. So that's perfect. All right, we'll take a look next at Lightroom, the new Lightroom. And I'm going to use the exact same image. Maybe I'll do a little bit more edits that might be easier to see versus actually trying to make it look like a serviceable photo. And what I'm going to do instead is use the new Lightroom, not the Lightroom Classic, and show you again how we can then submit this CR2 file or whatever RAW you happen to be working with and a individual sidecar file versus the library or catalog file, and allow your instructor to see the before and after changes to your RAW. So here I'm using the new Lightroom. And if you look at the tools, the interface is just slightly different, but they look very, very similar, right? You see the histogram at the top. You see all the typical sort of settings that we have here. There's a toolbar that's on the right. It even includes the masking feature. So if we click on the masking, oops, little clicky here, we're going to go ahead and click on the subject. And this time around, I'm going to lighten the subject just a crazy amount, just so we can see the difference very easily. This is basically very, very overexposed, and you never want to do that. And maybe we'll do some other sort of silly edits. We'll change the color, temperature, and make it, very much, maybe the opposite direction, very, very sort of a cool 1960s colors sort of fading from the print kind of a look. So it's very, very quick and easy to see what this is going to look like, right? So we'll do that. And when we're now that we're done, okay, with this, normally when we save this, it's going to save this item to sort of a catalog file. And what we're going to do instead is under File, we're going to go down to Export. And In the export, we're going to say what type of file we want to export it as. We've got options of JPEG, TIFF, PNG, JXL, AVIF, DNG. DNG, by the way, is one that will save all the sidecar file edits, but we're not going to then be able to see the original raw file. So instead, I'm going to go to original plus settings. Okay. The file naming, we can use a custom name, which I think I might do this time around. And we'll say Lightroom New, because there are two versions of Lightroom. There's the newer Lightroom with a more limited interface, and the Lightroom Classic, the LRC, which is really what most of the photographers are going to use. And we'll go ahead and click on the export. We want to say where we want to save it to. So I'm going to take it to where I am working on this item. And this is the Lightroom New. We'll click on export, and we've exported those items. Now we'll take a look at the directory to see what we have. So now we see here is Lightroom New CR2, because I renamed the file. It actually saved the old one, by the way. But I have Lightroom New CR2, and then I have this XMP sidecar file that's with it. And again, if I were to move the sidecar file and double click to open Lightroom, you would notice that the edits are gone because all the edits are contained in the sidecar file. So this is how you would do it with the new version of Lightroom. For those of you that are working with the new version of Lightroom, again, I would go ahead and make a zipped directory of this, and this would be what you would submit. Okay, it's going to contain the CR2 file or the NEF file, whatever the raw version is you have, along with that XMP sidecar as an individual sidecar file for that image only, which is very, very helpful. Unlike sometimes when you do a big photo shoot and you have the Lightroom catalog with it, that for our class purposes may be a little bit more difficult. Okay, so we're in Lightroom Classic, and I bypassed actually working with the library. We're going to go directly to the Develop module. So I'm going to click on the Develop module inside of Lightroom, and we can see the tools. Again, the layout's slightly different. The interface is slightly different, but we have a histogram here at the top. We've got our adjustment tools. We've got our crop. We've got the erasure tool, the red eye, and we've even got here the basic sort of masking functions. So I can come into this image, excuse me, and I'm going to go ahead and select the subject. It's going to use it to kind of find the subject that we want to affect. Okay, and we're going to click to show the overlay there too, so we can make our adjustments. And again, I'm going to change the exposure. Maybe again, I'm going to go way overexposed so we can see the differences really, really quickly. I think last time around, I really cooled the color temp to make it look like an old, maybe 1960s negative. And then we'll maybe move it this way just a little bit, just so each image looks at least slightly different. All right, so we've got our file kind of edited the way we want here. Underneath the file menu, I want to go down to export. Okay. The export location I'm going to keep same as the original. I can create a subfolder in here, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll just leave this name Untitled Export, but you can change the name of that. I'm going to go down to the file naming conventions and skip that. I'm going to go down to the video conventions. You can actually toggle these, by the way. So if I want to toggle it to kind of close it up, I can do that. But when I get to file settings, I want to make sure I keep it original. In other words, we can do a DNG which will apply the sidecar settings to our RAW and save it as a new file, but then I won't be able to see sort of the before and after. So I'm going to save it as the original image format here. You're going to see other kind of dialog boxes here if we want to resize it, if we want to adjust the sharpening. All right, so let's take a look at the file. This is the Lightroom Classic. Here's my original. I told it to create a new file called Untitled Export. You can see I have the Adobe Camera Raw So I can open it now in Camera Raw, by the way. I have my CR2 file here. It also puts a copy of the JPEG as well. But here's my XMP. Now, what I want to propose to do is I'm going to take this XMP out of this folder. I'm going to put it somewhere else. And now when we open the CR2, we should see the original file as shot. I'm going to go ahead and click cancel. I'm going to put the sidecar file back inside there. And again, the difference is this one was generated in Adobe Lightroom. So I'm going to put it back in there. I'm going to hit the CR2 file this time. And you'll notice all the changes are applied. Remember, CR2 files never change. They never get overwritten. What happens is all the changes you make get saved to a sidecar file. And that sidecar file is this XMP file. It needs to be in the same folder as the CR2 or the NEF or the ARW or whatever your raw file is. And then it will show up in Adobe Camera Raw. So we can see sort of before and after.